Are you a Lord of the Rings guy?
I've seen the movies. I'm not a big, like, I like other fantasy stuff, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff, but I'm
Yeah,
casual.
yeah, me too. I never read Lord of the Rings, but I did see, and I find that Peter Jackson shouldn't always need 3 hours to, for every single movie. He could just kind of like speed it up a bit. I saw news today trending on Twitter that I believe he is directing yet another one. And and maybe I misread the news, to be honest. This could be fake news, what's happening right now. The point is, I think Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings is enough. I think 3 Hobbit movies, 3 Lord of the Rings movies. It's time to move on to something different, and he should devote 18 hours of film to something else. That is my opinion.
Maybe something that you feel a little bit more passionately about than Lord of the Rings, enough to bring it up.
Yep. Okay. But this is something I saw. Hey, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Working on the Dad Pod. As always, I'm Ethan. This is Alex, and we're back after being off last week. I couldn't follow through on our previous week's episode, which was talking about keeping ourselves healthy when our kids are sick. I failed miserably. I'll get into that in a second, but before I do, I want to let you all know that tonight we're talking about traveling with kids. And please make sure to like and subscribe to this show on YouTube. We have an amazing set of alerts that will tell you when new episodes drop. If you are more of an audio fan, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. We could really use the help boosting this show. You can find us on workingонthedadpod.com and on all socials. Our handles are there. So now that that's out of the way, hello, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm good. My week this week is kind of going like yours. I don't have strep throat. It's not preventing me from podcasting tonight, but my son's sick, so I've got a little bit of what he's got, and but I'm excited to be here. It's a nice break in the week from the chaos of everyday life. How about you?
Yeah, well, so I am on the up and up. And however, as Alex mentioned, I after the baby had an ear infection and a double ear infection, and both girls had pink eye. My older one caught strep. I then caught strep. My wife caught strep. There was also flu in my daughter's class, so I'm pretty sure we got something viral as well. For the first time that I can remember, other than isolating in my room during COVID, both my wife and I had to take 3 days off work. Not even just like I'm sick, telework sick. It hurt too much to sit in front of a desk. And that is one of the reasons why we could not record last week. I just truly didn't have it in me. And yesterday, after, still working from home on Monday and then taking my daughters to the dentist and having my own doctor appointment on Tuesday, yesterday, I was finally back in the office after 3 weeks. And at 11:30, my wife called. The baby had a fever again. I could not leave that time, so she had to come home from work and take the baby home. And I had 3 or 4 important meetings today, and my own eye doctor appointment, which I had already canceled after the double pink eye, because that's not a cool thing to do when you have And then at the end of today, I got an email from my boss, who I had 2 meetings with yesterday. I was masked since I am not yet healthy, but she tested positive for COVID. So I am now on COVID watch in addition to everything else. Yeah. So this is just never ending, man. I am in a loop
spiral. It's a heck of a spiral because honestly, I won't go into it for all of my story time, but yeah, my son got some pink eye on Saturday. He hasn't been in school all week, and thankful to have two grandmas close by, but what they can commit to when they have advance notice and what they can commit to when they don't is different because they're real
Yep.
people with real lives, and it's understandable. And so, yesterday my mom had him all day, but that day didn't start till 10:30, so he got quite a bit of screen time while I tried to, get stuff done. Luckily my first meeting wasn't until 11, so I was able to juggle it. But getting into the meat of the episode, this is the week in our last live or new episode, non-rebroadcast episode a couple weeks ago, I mentioned the story of my wife buying tickets for her and my daughter to go to Paris, and they are currently there, which has made it harder on me right now to be sick and to have a sick kid. I am at that teleworking sick thing where it's just sniffles and a little bit of brain fog, and like I can push through and get everything done that I need to do, but everything's just a little bit harder than I would like it to be. So it's been an inconvenience and I haven't been able to go to the gym, but my daughter has been crushing it. And I want to sort of use it as a segue into our main topic. But today, for example, my wife texted me that they walked probably a total of like over 4 or 5 miles. They walked around Musée d'Orsay because she got which is the Impressionist Museum, if you're not familiar. They had like a kid's audio guide. The first day there, she like hiked the Eiffel Tower, but today it was like they were catching public transit. They were going places. They walked like 2 miles just to sort of see the Louvre and see some of the other sites they wanted to see, and no major breakdowns, right? Like
Nice.
cried a little bit when they missed a train because she thought she wasn't going to get to go to the museum, not sort of understanding that another one would be coming around.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, she's been an absolute champ. She slept, I think 6.5 hours on the overnight flight, which is not a lot, but because they're going ahead 6 hours, it meant she only had to last 7 or 8 hours on that amount of sleep. So she was able to get back in bed at a normal bedtime Paris time. So she's been crushing it. So that's been great to see. It's been great that my wife was sick over the weekend, but she was able to get over it by Monday so that for her Tuesday flight, she was feeling better. And while my son had pink eye, there was about as much hand washing as there had been since peak COVID to make sure that, back when we thought that COVID could be on the grocery bags that you were getting delivered to your front door, we were washing hands like that just to make sure that she couldn't get pink eye or anything like that. Because as you probably know, keeping sick kids apart that like to play together is really hard. So you just have to work to make sure everybody's as clean as possible.
Yeah. Well, hey man, that is awesome to hear. I at one point in the walk home from preschool today, with my 4.5-year-old, which is 2 blocks, she told me she was tired of walking, and then ran for a bit. So it's nice to hear that your daughter's doing well. And I do want to say one thing that I forgot to say. I am thankful that my mother-in-law, knowing that because of the time our baby had to be sent home from school, that she could not go today, and knew I had a busy work day, she did come over last night and stayed and played with the baby all day while I worked and went to my doctor's appointment. So thank you for that. And I thanked her by texting her that she has to be on COVID watch. So all is well.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. But so back to the travel thing, just to sort of get into the meat of the episode and get off the sick kids theme that I'm sure isn't going to bring up anybody's spirits. I was going to talk tonight about sort of 2 ways of travel, 2 main modes of travel of, road trips and flying trips that are long enough for flying. And obviously you can do some other methods. You could take a train or you could go on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise myself, let alone with a family. So I can't speak from any experience for that. If you can, obviously bring it up, but to my knowledge, you guys have not gone on a family cruise, maybe when you were little, but not with your kids.
Correct. I have been the kid on a family cruise.
Yeah. So with the road trips for us, I always find those, they have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Where the advantages are, for me, with my wife's car, she has a RAV4, right? Which is not the biggest car in the world, but for 4 people and cargo, it gets the job done. And that cargo for me is always like the really nice piece of like, we can carry a little bit more. Like back when my kids, either one of them were sleeping in a pack and play, we didn't have to rely on whatever crappy rental version was going to be at a hotel, right? We could bring our own stroller instead of having to rent one or find one or carry like a little umbrella stroller that was not going to be able to hold up to the long haul of what we needed to do, or packing extra diapers, extra clothes, extra things, extra toys. It's just a little bit nicer when you drive. And so I think for that method, you know, it's easy because it's your car, right? You know, just talking about the ones not where you might fly somewhere and rent a car, but when you drive in your own car, it's just nice because you know where everything is. You're comfortable driving it. The kids, you have your own setups of like those kind of trips you might take that are 30 minutes away or 45 minutes away. You just sort of expand those setups, plan them around nap time a little bit. And I think that's sort of the other advantage too, right? Of like when you go on these road trips, assuming you have the kind of kid that'll sleep in the car, you can plan them around nap time and you can make the parenting a little bit easier, especially if both kids fall asleep. But if you've only got one kid and they nap in the car, that can be just huge to, you know, knock out an hour and a half or 2 hours without having to worry about, you know, feeding snacks or entertainment or kid getting bored or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. There's also, you know, a little bit of flexibility with regard to a road trip in that, you know, you want to leave when you want to leave. However, you can be a little tardy on departure if, you know, if you're having a tough morning. Whereas, you know, if you're trying to catch a flight, everything has to be ready to go when it's ready to go, or else you're going to miss your flight. Yeah. So I will also say the nice thing can also, well, let me rephrase that. Sometimes with a road trip, knowing I have to take, when I can take as much stuff as I can, the hardest part is in the morning when there's stuff that you need to pack that the kids need to sleep. For example, you know, the sound machine, the night light, maybe a stuffy that you know, are waiting to put in the one suitcase where you can wrap it and keep it safe. But then that suitcase is also crucial to your trunk Tetris. When we only have the one car, a Toyota Camry, so trunk Tetris is actually something that's quite important for the road trip to make sure everything goes. So
yeah, and I think that, but I think that goes for flights too, right? You have things that you still need to pack, and maybe they're not as crucial for the trunk Tetris, but it's getting everything in the car, having that peace of mind, and then you have the two lists. You have the packing list and the morning of list. And I think a lot of times for us, based on what the best flight times might be, or when it's the best time to leave, or let's say we're trying to do something for us where we're a couple hours away from a lot of theme parks. And so maybe we're trying to leave really early, like 6 a.m., and have the kids, you know, quietly usher them into the car so that maybe they fall back asleep, but it's just that right amount of time. Or if they didn't go back to sleep, it wouldn't absolutely ruin their day because it's only 30 to 45 minutes early. That kind of sweet spot. We are sometimes trying to do that. And so, yeah, you want to like have it picked out of like what the stuff is going to be that they need. Luckily, our kids have gotten pretty flexible where it's like they can pick a stuffy. My son is really weird about it, where like he doesn't like anything on his bed. He like has all the dolls off. He makes the blanket be removed and be on the floor. It cannot be on the foot of his bed. He's a 3-foot high guy. Got him measured at urgent care tonight. He's 37 inches and he's on a twin bed, but God forbid that thing be curled up at the very end. No, it needs to be off. Anyway, picking out the stuff for the road trip isn't the hard part, but I agree with you that the flexibility for me of being able to say, I'd like to leave at 8, but if we left at 8:30 or 9, it just means we check in later and we'd have to shorten up or eliminate an activity or two.
Right.
Whereas flying, I still am nervous around flying with kids, right? Because I have so much less control. I'm not. How far in advance do you get to the airport?
So we both have Clear because my mom got a deal to add us as like a family add-on, and they haven't kept charging her for us, and haven't like ruined or canceled our account. So we still use the Clear, but
Okay.
I have TSA pre, but my wife does not. So what happens there is my wife and I, since we both have Clear, end up going to the front of our respective security lines. And I end up taking everything that could have liquid and electronic, most of the carry-ons, because they see us separate and they understand what's going on. But since I don't have to take off shoes, belt, anything, because I'm TSA pre, my wife just kind of goes through with the baby. And it's me, the 4.5-year-old, and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And it has worked for us. However, what starts off as me like having the ability to get everything balanced turns into me kind of like looking like I'm Goofy in an old episode of Mickey Mouse where I'm just trying to walk, and it's as if I'm tumbling over like a inflatable, car salesman man.
Yeah.
But to answer your actual question, I would say we try to get to the airport with 2 hours to get through security, just in case there's an issue.
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm not one of those like classic dad stories of people that like to get to the airport 3 and 4 hours ahead of time because you never know kind of stuff. Because I find airport waiting areas and gates usually pretty awful. I would say we're probably more on the hour and a half side.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 2 is totally reasonable. Any closer than that, and it depends, right? My wife wanted to be down for their flight to Paris early because that's international and all that stuff. But yeah, I think with the kids, it takes a little bit longer to get everybody out of the car, to get everybody's stuff shuffled in, to get everybody where they need to go. There's going to be, at least one potty trip, if not multiple, getting shoes on or off when the kids don't actually need to take them off, but they're doing what mom and dad are doing. And like, then you're putting them back on and then you're waiting for them. And one kid's running off because mom's headed towards the gate and they didn't hear stay with dad. And it can get a little chaotic. And so I think for us, it's one of those where I'm not against flying with the kids, but I am much more in a camp now. And it was a conversation my wife and I were having recently about the idea of traveling with the kids, of how we kind of don't want to take my son anywhere right now on a plane, where we are much more content to do these kind of one-on-one trips with my daughter. Like I'd like to plan a couple for her and I to take, but basically like he's going to cost an airline seat and he's not going to remember anything. And he's going to make it way harder because he has to nap and she doesn't, right? He's going to, slow everything down and have to take more potty breaks and not be able to hold it and not be able to communicate what they want as effectively. And so we were just sort of like, what if we did more just like parent-daughter trips where it's just her and one parent, because she can kind of hang and she doesn't have as many of those little kid things that just make it that much harder.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to consider. I did just remember our last trip to Los Angeles. We flew out of Dulles, and for some reason they had the clear line for pre-check on one floor and the clear line for regular check-in on the other. So our normal split wasn't just 2 lines. It was my wife and the baby went downstairs and me and the 4.5-year-old and all the stuff were upstairs. And I knew I eventually had to meet them downstairs. And my daughter freaked out at the escalator. And then when she stepped on, she didn't know that her other foot had to, lift off the ground too. So she then ends up doing the splits on the escalator. I then trip. I tumble down the escalator with all the bags and ended up leaving one at the top of the escalator and end up like yelling to somebody, saying, please, this is not a see something, say something. Can somebody just bring my bag down when they come down the escalator? And my kid's crying, and I am literally holding my knee because I'm in so much pain, but also trying to hold on to the rest of the stuff. And yeah, I'm glad we had that little extra time to do check-in. But somebody, this kind woman who saw the whole thing, brought my bag down and just handed it to me while laughing. And then there was this other family, and this mom saw the whole thing, and they had 3 kids. And she goes up to my daughter and says, would you like to hold my hand while your daddy's right behind us with all his stuff as we go down the next escalator? And she looked at me and she's like, I know that's okay. I realize I'm a stranger, but I think I'm okay taking your daughter's hand right now. And I was just so angry, so mad, didn't think my kid forgot how escalators worked and was fuming. So just really glad we had that extra time.
Yeah, that seems like the kind of for the guy who is always like, I don't need help, I can do everything, I'm a strong, independent dad. Like that had to like grind your gears of like, no, that's super helpful, but I hate you.
Pretty much. I was so embarrassed because this was a very public fall, which is never what you want.
Well, I think for us, one of the other things for us that I think has made flying, getting through the airport's not as big of a deal. We don't have clear or pre-check, either one of us. But what we do have is our primary airport, being West Palm Beach, is much smaller, and it probably takes us about the same amount of time to get through security as it takes you with all the things that you do or don't pay for. But it's also just the carrying of the stuff, right? You just alluded to it with tripping and falling down the escalator, but it's all of the things. And whether you're the type of person, like I know you guys have always been big on airplane car seats, recommending those. We've never used them. We've never been in a scenario where we never really traveled where we needed one. Like we traveled with my daughter when she was a little younger than 1, and she was a lap child, and she did fine on the lap without having, her own seat or a car seat. And then we haven't traveled with my son, but we won't, for a while. But he was a lap infant the last time. This time that they go up to Massachusetts this summer, I don't think they'll use a car seat just because he's so, he'll be 2.5 then, and he's already so mobile that I don't know. But I also understand the value of, like, on the flip side of that, like, we're traveling light, but we've got to make sure that, like, we're comfortable with the rental car agency on the other end providing a car seat. Now, for us, obviously, it's a little bit different, a little bit easier, where one of our primary trips, as I just mentioned, is going up to Massachusetts to see my in-laws, and like they just bring their car seats from down here up there in their cars, and those are the cars we're riding around in, and that becomes perfectly tenable. But any sort of vacations where we're flying, it does become a thing where, like, there's part of a reason that my wife, the 2 trips she took with my daughter were to New York City and Paris. Like, there's no need to be in a car if you don't want to be in a car. And so it's one less thing that she has to worry about.
Yeah. If we were flying someplace that had where we had car seats readily available, we might rethink doing it. But considering, we are taking we are taking a car that is not ours to the airport. The travel car seats, they're made to fit in the plane, but they obviously work in a car. They are still car seats. And then, they sit in them, and then it's the same car seat we use to get to my parents, whichever one of it be my dad, my mom, or my brother that picks us up in Los Angeles, because they don't own car seats there. I'm sure they could, but,
it feels like a hefty investment for an annual vacation.
Right.
And God forbid you guys couldn't make it one particular year. And then it's like
exactly
the value of that car seat just gets cut in half for a 2-year period of time.
Pretty much. And it's also one of those things where the travel car seats we have, actually one of the attachments you can do is tie them to the rolly the check-on lug the suitcase, so we can just strap them in there.
The handlebar of a rolling travel carry-on
Yeah.
suitcase.
Yeah. So then they are now on the other end of the suitcase, and we're just rolling them through the airport. It was great when they're super small and they're willing to stay in it, and you like all the attention you're getting from onlookers being like, oh, let's get out of their way. This cute little family is rolling their kids. But yeah. Anyway. So.
Well, yeah, I think there are one of the other things that, I just wanted to touch on a little bit. I hear a lot of people, because my wife and I did a bunch of travel before we moved to Florida and had kids and all that stuff. And I hear a lot of people having sort of that backpacking lifestyle with their kids, right? Just traveling all the time, or maybe they're, homeschooling them, or when they're preschool age, just traveling around the world with them. And I'm like, good on you. But what I wanted to say to people is I think that like there are a lot of people that I think, and this is a through line with a lot of parenting topics, you'll have somebody where something works for them and they'll get that confirmation bias, right? Where they'll say, I just did X, Y, and Z with my kid, and therefore they were a good traveler, and therefore any kid can be a good traveler. Where it's like, well, maybe your kid just fit really well into X, Y, Z, and you got lucky, and like you're not accounting for the amount of luck that you had there. Because just like anything, whether it's potty training or sleep training or any sort of type of conditioning a kid to do a certain behavior, like some kids take to it and some kids don't a lot easier with a lot more trouble. And I think travel is kind of the same, right? And I also don't think it's static to throw that label on them. I don't think my daughter was a particularly good traveler when she was little. Like, she did fine on that trip to California. She did okay, but like traveling with her and taking car rides, she was very prone to like taking 20-minute naps and then like sort of ruining her sleep schedule and being ornery in the evenings when she was little and stuff like that. Now that she doesn't have to nap, that being such a big hiccup and sticking point, it's removed, it's gone, and she's a much better traveler. And so I think she went from, whereas I think my son is actually a really good traveler because he's really good about just like, even to this day, when we were in Tampa just 2 months ago, it's like he got so sleepy that we're on like an open air streetcar going through Tampa, and I'm like carrying him 15 minutes from the streetcar in like by an interstate traffic and stuff in like 87-degree heat, and he's just sleeping away on my shoulder until we get back to the Airbnb and I can set him down. And of course then he wakes up. I'm like, sure, you didn't want to stay awake when I had to carry your sorry tail, but like, okay, now you're gonna wake up as soon as we're back in the air conditioning, and dad was looking for a few, just give me 15 minutes of you chilling and I chilling, and no, you're back. Okay, great. Thank you, sir. But
yeah, I also think, just to allude back to something you said earlier, it's great if you want to travel the world with a kid under the age of 4 and show them all that the world has to offer, but they're not going to remember it most likely.
Yeah, and I think some people probably aren't. I would think most people aren't necessarily doing it for some whole thing of like, I'm doing this strictly primary reason so my kids will remember it. It's just like, I want to do it and I don't want to let the kids stop me. Which
sure, I get that, and that's fine. And I've had my own difficulties finding a babysitter, even just for an hour or two. So I can't imagine an international trip if you don't have one available.
I think again, it comes down to different people's priorities, where like, I think some people want to keep some semblance or the whole thing of the lifestyle they were leading before kids. And then they get a kid that can mesh really well with that lifestyle. That's really flexible. It's like, I have some friends who they have a kid, and he would come to like the homebrew meetings I would go to. They moved out of the area, but it's just like, we'd have get-togethers and he'd be like hanging till like 9 o'clock at like 2 years old. But like, they had set it up where, he was spending all his days with grandmas, and like kid didn't go to bed till 10, but he woke up at 8, and he was just on a different sleep schedule. And so he could hang at 9 o'clock at night and not turn into a total gremlin like our kids. Right. And it just becomes a thing of like, they wanted him to fit into their lifestyle, and that's great. But like, I don't think there was ever going to be a point, unless we did a lot of like intentional sleep deprivation, where my daughter at like a year and a half, 2 years old, was going to be able to hang at 9:30 at night.
Right.
So,
yeah. I know some people who didn't really let having a kid change what they want to do. And some days I'm jealous of that, but sometimes I think having a kid can be one of the greatest excuses to get out of a social obligation.
Oh yeah. I'm right there with you. Sometimes when I don't want to do stuff, I'm just like, like there was definitely, I think when I first had a kid and I realized the power I wielded, there were a couple of times where I just like said my kid was sick, and then somebody would go, "How's the kid?" And I'd be like, "She's fine." I'd be like, "Oh, I told you she was sick." Yeah, she's getting better.
Yeah. I never lied about sick. It was just
or the baby's tired and I need to get out of here, kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Did that?
Yeah,
usually true on a spectrum of totally untrue to some true. It definitely wasn't totally untrue.
Right. Or just, I can't go tonight because I have a kid and my wife has a different plan or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously a whole other conversation. But all I wanted to say was to people that are maybe get jealous or FOMO or feel like they're doing something wrong because it's hard to travel with kids, right? Kids need to sleep. And when you're flying, sometimes that flight is conveniently before or after nap time, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes napping on a plane is really, really hard. Like my daughter did really well, but speaking of stuff, my wife got like this footrest that's inflatable that goes in the seat well, and it can inflate so high that it's at seat height. So it basically created this like mattress for her for the whole like depth of the seat and the leg room. And so I think that was how she was able to sleep. And I was like, so I think there are ways you could accommodate it. But again, that's more stuff to carry, more stuff to buy, more stuff to pack, more stuff to have, more stuff to find use cases for the times you're not flying on a overnight flight where you need your 5-year-old to sleep for 6.5 hours, right? You sit there and, or in your case where it's like, yeah, you got these awesome car seats. Well, in my house, if we had those kind of car seats too, another consideration, like, where the hell are we going to put them for the 360 days we're not on a plane each year,
Yeah. But we have one and our neighbor has one, and we each have 2 kids. So it's nice because when either family travels, we lend the other. So, nice. And each one of them's only it was only a $50 purchase. So considering the amount of times we've used them, and even if it's mainly just the 1 10-day trip a year to California, we definitely have gotten our money's worth from it. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a peace of mind to, be the one to install it, to buy it, to know where that car seat's been. So I get it. Yeah. But shall we get into working on the dad bod?
Yeah. So I not surprisingly, but I knew how sick I was and how I didn't have a lot of time kids home. So there were a couple days where I milked the sickness and non-hunger to keep my calories down. And then because I still am not back to normal and, I'm still coughing up a lot, I haven't really exercised, but I have been trying to take more advantage of all the steps. Any opportunity to take steps I have done.
Yeah.
And I, have been more cognizant on the calorie watching. So 2 weeks ago, Thursday, April 25th was the last time we recorded. I was 190.6. It is Thursday, May 9th, so 14 days. And my full nude pre-recording weigh-in, I'm 189.4. So that means I lost 1.2 pounds over the 2-week period. I did not weigh myself last week because I barely stood up last Thursday.
Sure.
But I'm still on the Thursday night weigh-ins. when I am back to not being sick, I think I'm going to add a second consistent weigh-in during the week. But I am happy to be below the 190 threshold. Yeah. Again, for everyone, my goal is 175 by mine and Alex's July guys trip. But given the fact that I was near death, or at least I felt near death, I'm pretty happy with the fact that I made some progress.
Yeah, cool. Well, 2 weeks ago, I was 182 even, and this week I am 182.5. I think I'm not sweating it too much. It's been lower. It's been down as low as like 180.6 and, as high as maybe 183. I think that's probably just some normal fluctuations and things going on. So not too worried about it. I think the process is right there, and I'm just going to keep going. I've got about 4 more weeks, and then I'm going to stop dieting no matter where the number is, just because I want to give myself a mental and physical break from it, and, just sort of regroup for, 4, 5, 6 weeks until our guys trip, and then come back and sort of get after it again. But, if I need to, because maybe at the end of the 6 weeks, I'm where I want to be. And by staying at maintenance calories, I do a little more body recomp and I feel good. So you never know. But right. Yeah, I want to get back to 100% working out regularly. But I think that's much more of it affects my mood and motivation and dopamine throughout the day if I don't get that morning workout in. So I'm sort of feeling it right now. And I'm, hoping I can get back to working out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, these kids really get in the way of stuff that we want to do. Maybe those parents who pretend they don't have kids and just get moved on with their lives are onto something. So
yeah, I guess, but yeah, you still gotta stay home when they're sick.
It's true. All right. Well, I hope you're feeling better soon.
Same.
To all of our listeners who are watching us right now, please stay healthy as well. I know that our personalities are contagious, so hopefully our ailments are not. So thanks again for bearing through that awful outro and working on the dad pod with us. Again, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts if you prefer audio. And I'm going to hope Alex just plays me off like it's the Oscars, because I am rambling like a doof.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Let it linger a little bit.
All right.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.